Hello everybody, and welcome to my flight planning session. In this session we will be planning a flight from Mumbai, India to Bhavnagar, India. Mumbai is a big airport. It's also known as Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport. Bhavnagar is a small airport located in the Gujarat state of India, slightly to the north west of Mumbai airport. And in this session I hope to plan and execute a successful flight between these two airports. I'm not a real pilot. I don't fly for real, but I'm going to try to make this session such that we try to keep in mind as many real world concerns as possible, just so as to make it as realistic as possible. So I've got the website SkyVector open in front of me right now, which is a free website that is used for flight planning by pilots. It has aeronautical charts for the whole world now, and we're looking at the map of India. This blue dot that I am encircling with the mouse cursor right now, that is where Mumbai International Airport is, and Bhavnagar Airport does not get denoted by a dot because it does not have its own weather station, but it's in the approximate area where you see me encircling the mouse cursor right now. So let's go ahead and get our flight planned. So the identifier for Mumbai Airport is VABB. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. So that zooms us into the Mumbai area. If I zoom out, you can see that we are indeed zoomed in on the Mumbai area. And then from there we plan to fly to Bhavnagar, which is VABV. Oops, I accidentally added Mumbai twice. Let me take it out and I will add Bhavnagar. Okay, now the aircraft I'm going to be using is the Mooney M20J, in which I observed ground speeds in the neighborhood of, I want to say maybe 175 knots, let's just say, or 177 I think is a better estimate. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter, and it'll reconfigure a flight time of approximately 55 minutes. Let me see what this error is that keeps coming up on my computer. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're back. Hopefully I got rid of that error. So basically this little window in the upper left hand corner is telling me that if I fly a direct line between these airports at the ground speed of 177 knots, it'll take me about 55.5 minutes. The total distance covered will be 163.7 nautical miles. Now, nautical miles are a little bit longer than the miles that you're used to when you talk about driving. I think one statute mile, which is what you use on the road, is about 1.16 nautical mile. So a nautical mile is slightly longer. It's used in aviation because aviation derives a lot of its analogies from sailing, sea travel, and nautical miles and knots have been used traditionally in that field of transportation. So anyway, let me go ahead and get the map centered back on Mumbai Airport. Okay, here we are. So from Mumbai, we fly to Bhavnagar, which is following this magenta colored line, and all is well except until we get to about this point right here. If you notice, there is a big chunk of airspace over the water right here. I'm encircling it here again with my mouse, which is enclosed in this sort of zipper pattern lines. It is denoted VAR41. Now I did some research and I found out that VAR is Indian airspace that is restricted. The R means restricted, and the number of this airspace is 41. So I went looking to see what kind of restrictions are attached to this airspace, and I found this document online which says VAR 41 is an area bounded by a bunch of GPS coordinates, and basically what it says is that from 2,000 feet down to ground level, this airspace is for local flying area, or the airspace is designated as a local flying area for Kalyan-based helicopters. The controlling authority for this airspace is Mumbai. Now, what that the reason why it's mentioned what the controlling authority is if you were trying to make this flight in real life, you could contact Mumbai ATC and you could request transit through this airspace and they could grant it to you. I don't fly out there. I don't, like I said, I don't fly in real life, so I don't know what the real rules are or what the local experience of pilots is out there. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to assume that I cannot fly through that airspace, and I'm going to try to plan my flight around that airspace just so that I don't get in trouble with Mumbai ATC or in real life whatever else they might dispatch to you or intercept you with, maybe Indian Air Force, I don't know. I'll just pretend that I don't have permission to fly through that airspace and I'll plan around it. So let's go back to our sky vector planning map, and we notice that this is the airspace chunk that we just talked about. Other than that, we also have this airspace chunk of airspace to deal with. So let's find out what VAR 47, which this is designated as, is all about. So we go back to our document, and let me just do a quick find on VAR 47, and let's see what it comes up with. VAR 47 is an area bounded by the following GPS coordinates, and it is a local flying area. Well, that doesn't really say much. I don't know what that means. Local flying area, does that mean I can fly through it? Does that mean I cannot fly through it? I mean, I am a local flight going from Mumbai to Bhavnagar. But again, just to be on the safe side, let me go ahead and assume that I don't have permission to fly through that chunk of airspace, and so I must plan around that. So, going back to our map, just zoom out so we can see our entire flight path. This is the Mumbai airport, this is the Bhavnagar airport. We would like to fly a straight line. That would be the most beautiful situation. We would save on fuel, we would go the shortest distance. But because I cannot transit, or at least I'm pretending I cannot transit the two chunks of restricted airspace, I must plan a flight around them. So one option is to do something like this, go out to the sea and then kind of plan around that. And let me just move my flight path. So that's one option. We're avoiding those two airspaces, but at the bottom you can see we're going through another sort of triangular restricted airspace. We're going to cut through the top of that. I don't know what the rules are on that one. I'm not going to look it up, but I'm just going to show you another option that jumps out at me that I think might be a more feasible option. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those 2 points that I just introduced. And do some rearranging. So we could, once we take off from Mumbai International Airport, we can kind of fly north like this over the land. Since we're going to be in a single engine general aviation aircraft, it is advisable to fly as much of the flight over land as possible. You want to avoid exposure to water as much as possible, because in the event of an engine failure, you want to be very close to land, or you want to be close enough to land when you are over water such that you can make a glide landing to some place that's offshore, but still on the land, like on the beach. The last thing you want is to have an unplanned landing in the water. Then we could fly sort of near this airport, which is a Coast Guard station. I believe it's called Daman or Daman. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. D-A-M-A-N. Maybe people that are from India or that live there, they probably know in case they're watching. And then from Daman we can go to this little airport, which is Surat Airport. Let me get that straight. I kind of messed that up. Okay, so I got Daman, I got Surat, and now you can kind of see we're flying towards Bhavnagar. Not exactly a direct line, but we are managing to avoid these restricted airspaces, so we should not technically get in trouble by any agency. Now let me zoom in a little bit on this area, which is north of Surat. I'm going to double click on that, zoom in on that. Now you can see we're still kind of clipping the corner of that restricted airspace. Why don't we go ahead and move out to, say, over here, and that seems to look more like a feasible flight plan, a much more doable flight plan. I've got this exact flight plan already planned why don't I just bring it in rather than trying to explain it. I've already got it planned, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that up in the URL line and press enter, and SkyVector should show me the flight plan. Okay, great, awesome. Let me zoom out again just so you can see the big picture. All right, so from Mumbai, we're going to fly north to this point, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about what that point is a little bit later on. That's going to be 33 nautical miles at a magnetic heading of 001. From there on, we will continue on a magnetic heading of 001, another 47.9 nautical miles, and that will get us over to Daman. From Daman, we will fly at a heading of 350 at a distance of 41 nautical miles. That will get us over to Surat Airport. Let me go ahead and center the map on that and zoom in a little bit so you can see Surat. Then from Surat we will go a little bit more sort of northwest bound to this point over here, and then from there we will finally cross over the water, and you can see that that makes a lot more sense, because instead of trying to cross the water say here, which would mean we would have to cross a lot of water, we're minimizing our exposure over water, thereby reducing risk of water landing, unplanned water landing, by trying to cross the water at the narrowest point possible. Okay, great. Let's get into a little bit more detail about what each of these points is. So let's go back to Mumbai Airport, and now I'm going to zoom in and sort of go through this flight on the map. So here we have, you actually see two airports here. One, the big one here with the multiple runways, that's Mumbai. That's where we're going to be taking off from. The other airport that you see is Juhu Airport. I don't know much about that. But there it is, sort of next to Mumbai Airport. Just ignore it for now. So we take off from Mumbai Airport and we start flying northbound. And the first, since we're going to be making this flight VFR, which means visual flying rules, we are going to be dependent on seeing a lot of landmarks for navigation. So we need to plan the flight such that we sort of plan our waypoints to coincide with major landmarks. So the first point that I picked, and my rationale for picking this point was, again, let me zoom in a little bit so I can explain a little better what's going on. If you look carefully over here, you got a river going northbound, and that at the point I planned for navigation, that river splits. You get a branch going to the right, sort of going eastbound, and you got another branch that continues northbound. Exactly what's happening here is the big river starting from this point, from the sea coming into the land, that's the Vaitarna River, and at the point that I've planned as a waypoint for our flight, the Vaitarna River continues to flow eastbound, and what shoots off of it and goes up north, that's the Surya River. So that would be an important point that we could plan into our flight, because that would be easy to see and identify from the air. Moving on to our next viewpoint, or waypoint, sorry, is the Daman Airport. That's an Indian Coast Guard station. So it's going to be an airport with a lot of military planes, I imagine, or at least some runways that we could see. So I thought that would be another sort of good landmark to point as our waypoint. And then we will fly over the water just a little bit, but as I will later show you, I have planned an altitude for this flight that is high enough that should we encounter an engine failure over water, we will have enough altitude to glide back to shore and make an emergency landing over there. I'll get into that when we get into some other aspects of the flight plan later. So from Daman Airport, we continue our flight to over Surat Airport, which is another waypoint. Again, easy to see because it's going to be an airport. So we'll know obviously when we're right over that. And then from Surat we continue a little bit northwards, because again we don't want to clip that restricted airspace, so we'll continue sort of northbound until we get to there's really nothing over here like an airport or a mountain, but the best way I can describe it is we will continue from Surat at a heading of 350 until we encounter the first body of water that's sort of jutting into the land. Maybe I can call it a sound. So basically just before the first peninsula that we encounter. And then at that point, we will actually turn to a heading of 305 for another 33 nautical miles. That'll take us over the water all the way into the Bhavnagar area where we plan to make a landing. Now you've seen our flight path on SkyVector, which is a website that pilots use to plan and navigate their flights. Let me show you the exact same flight path on a map that you, as a person who may not be familiar with flying, may be more used to, and that is Google Maps. So let's go over to Google Maps, and you see the map of India here, and we've got our flight path. I've got each separate leg of the flight path colored in a different color just so that it's clear to everybody what we're doing here. Let me go ahead and actually turn on terrain so we can see more clearly what's going on. Okay, so let's start at Mumbai and do basically what we did with SkyVector, which is basically follow the path of our flight. So again, we start here in Mumbai, and the first leg of our flight, which is denoted by this blue line, it'll go to this point here where we can see that the two rivers are splitting away from each other, the Vaitarna River and the Surya River. And then we continue on from there, sort of flying between two mountain ranges. This is one mountain range on our right, this is another mountain range that's going to be on our left. We fly pretty much until the Surya River starts turning right, continue in our heading all the way until we pass another range of mountains on our left. We go over these highways. I think this highway is easy, should be easy to identify. That's Route 5, close to a little city called Bhilad. And then we come to Daman, which you see over here. That's where we expect to see the Indian Coast Guard station. In fact, if I zoom in on that area, you can probably see the two runways that are expected to be found at Daman. You can see them here. I'm rubbing the mouse cursor over them. And then from Daman, we continue a little bit over the water, keep going, passing over the Arabian Sea, but staying close enough to shore to be able to land in case of an engine failure. And we keep going all the way, and we come to Surat Airport, which is located right here. You can kind of see the configuration of the runway there. It's kind of a northeast southwest layout of the runway. After Surat, we fly over the Tapi River, which will be the first body of water we cross. We keep going. We've got sort of a lake over here that will make it easy for us to identify it, maybe double check our position. Don't know what the name of this lake is, but it seems like it's right next to a town called Barbodhan. From there we keep flying according to our flight path until we get to, let me zoom out a little bit, until we get to the area of the Narmada estuary. At the area of the Narmada estuary, we turn towards Bhavnagar, which is the last leg of our flight, the yellow leg, and then we end up at Bhavnagar Airport, which is right here in the top left hand corner. So now you've seen the flight plan, you've seen it on two different maps, you've seen it on the pilot map, you've seen it on Google Maps. That is basically the path of the flight that I hope to plan and execute. I have got a flight plan spreadsheet going here, which details the multiple phases of this flight. I'd like to show that to you so that you know what some of the things will be that I'll be talking about during the flight. We've got basically, I'll go ahead and I'll expand that. Yep. Okay, so we've got, we're going to be making this flight in the Mooney M20J, which you'll get to see a little bit better in the flight simulator. It's a pretty nice aircraft. It has a ground speed of about 177 knots. So at that speed, I'm expecting this flight to last me, now given our modified flight path that we have now, I expect the flight to last me about 59.1 minutes, assuming there's no wind. We will reconfigure that if we find strong headwinds or tailwinds. And just to point out real quick, you can see that our current flight path, which is a deviation from the ideal straight line flight path, only added about 4 minutes to our straight line time, which was around 55 minutes. So just with a little bit careful planning, you can get a much safer flight plan, much more sensible flight plan, and it's not like you're going out of your way and you're going to make yourself an hour late or anything. We only added 4 minutes in doing all this planning that we did. And we did it because we want to minimize exposure to water, and we want to not penetrate any restricted airspace that we may not have permission to enter. So back to our flight plan spreadsheet. So here on the top, this aircraft burns about 11.2 gallons of fuel per hour. This flight's going to be about an hour, so I'm going to carry a little bit of extra. I'm going to start with 15 gallons of fuel on board. I plan to cruise at 70% engine power, and total time en route is expected to be about an hour, like I said before. Total distance covered according to our modified flight plan is going to be 174 nautical miles. So basically my checkpoints are starting at Mumbai Airport. We'll fly to the point where the rivers split, the Vetarna River and the Surya River. Then we'll fly to Daman Coast Guard Station. Then we'll fly to the Surat Airport. Then we'll fly to that point that is north of Surat, which is near the Narmada estuary. From there on, we will continue to the Bhavnagar Airport. The altitude. So for the first 2 legs of flight, our altitude is going to be 7,500 feet. Then at Daman, we will start a descent to 6,500 feet. And the reason why I picked these altitudes, again, I wanted to be high enough to be able to glide back to land in case of an engine failure. And also, these altitudes are in consistency with VFR flying rules according to the FAA, which is more a rule in the United States. Again, I don't know what the rules are out there in India, but I'm just, the US rules is what I'm more familiar with, so I'm kind of going by them. This column here basically shows what the individual distances of the multiple legs of the flight are going to be, estimated time en route for each leg, estimated time of arrival. This is just, it helps with navigation to double check your speed and position. And then Bombay Airport has an elevation of 39 feet above sea level, and Bhavnagar Airport has an elevation of 44 feet above sea level. This is just something you want to know because that's the airports you're going to be taking off and landing from. So it helps to know what altitude you started at and what your cruising altitude is. Thereby you can calculate things such as time, fuel, and distance to climb, and time, fuel, and distance used during the descent. So that's basically the planning phase of this flight. Again, I'm just going to zoom out so you can see the map. This is going to be our flight path, and I will see you in the flight simulator where we will actually make this flight. Alright guys, here we are in the X-Plane 9.70 simulator. We've got our airplane parked at Mumbai Airport. Nice train going by here. We've got our aircraft parked at Mumbai Airport. It's early in the morning. It's just before 6 o'clock. The weather is very nice. We don't have a lot of wind. We have some cumulus clouds, as you can see up there, but they are at 8,500 feet. And our cruising altitude of 7,500 feet will not pose us any problems because we are going to be safely below those clouds. So, with that said, let's go to our aircraft. So you can see, because it's early morning, the taxiway and runway lighting at Mumbai Airport is still alive. And here is our Mooney M20 aircraft parked on the apron. So we're completely shut down. The aircraft is cold. One thing I have to warn you about is that my computer is very old. It's not a very powerful machine, so I've got my scenery settings turned down very, very low in order to be able to maintain good frame rates because not only am I running this simulation program in tandem with this, I'm also running video recording software, which also takes a lot of computing power. So I'm very sorry if some of the quality is going to look rather cartoonish, but hopefully in the near future I can build a more powerful computer and bring better videos out to you guys. So we've got our pre-flight inspection complete, passengers loaded, fuel loaded, and we are ready to start our aircraft. So let's go inside the airplane and close it up and start it up and get it ready for flight and navigation. So the first thing I'll do is, well, this should have been done outside the airplane, but because this is a simulation, we can do it from inside the airplane. I'll go ahead and close the oil access door. That's done. Next, I'll go ahead and close the passenger door. That's done. And finally, we will go ahead and close the luggage door or the trunk door. Okay, boy, that was a hard to reach door. Finally, that's done. Now we'll go ahead and proceed to start up the aircraft. I've got this little checklist or utility that I use. That way I go through the list in a methodical manner and I don't forget anything. So we'll go ahead and use this checklist to start up the airplane. So again, for those of you that are starting the video at this point, we are at Mumbai Chhatrapati Shivaji Airport in our Mooney M20J. We plan to fly to Bhavnagar Airport. We are inside the aircraft and we are starting it up, getting it ready for flight. So the first thing we'll do is keep our master switch to the off position, or the starter switch to the off position. That's done. Gear switch down, master switch on. So this is our master switch on. And we're just going to check to see if our outside lights are working. So I'll go ahead and turn on our strobe light, our nav light, and our landing light. And we'll basically go outside the airplane real quick and check if they are working. Yep, the red and the green lights on the wings are our nav lights. The blinking lights are our strobe lights. In the front here you can see our landing light is on. And on the tail we've got a small tail light. Back inside the airplane. Once the lighting checks are complete, we go ahead and turn the lights back off, turn our master switch back off. We don't want to waste battery while we're doing other things. Empennage, wings, aileron, flaps, propeller, fuel quantity, these are all things that, because we are assuming our pre-flight is complete, we're assuming that these things are already done, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next page. Some of the things are already done here as well. Parking brake is on, starter switch, master switch off, radio master switch to the off position. I'll go ahead and do that. Ram air control to the closed position, that's already closed. Cabin heat off, that's already done. Next. Okay, throttle forward about 25%. I'll go ahead and do that. Master switch on. Great. Mixture control. Okay, our mixture is going to be full forward 3 to 5 seconds and then full aft. I'm actually going to go ahead and keep it forward because I know from experience the aircraft does not want to start very nicely with the mixture control aft. Starter switch to both. One thing I want to do before we go ahead and start our engine is just to double check our fuel. If you remember in the pre-flight planning, I said that the flight was going to be about 1 hour and I wanted to carry some extra fuel. So I'm going to go ahead and carry with me about 1 3/4 of an hour or 1.7 hours of fuel, just to be on the safe side. Okay, we've got our proper amount of fuel loaded and we're ready to start our engine. So I'll go ahead and start our engine. Okay, we have our engine running. Here you can see it from outside the airplane. just brought the throttle back to the idle position. Let's check our engine instruments just to make sure that our engine temperatures and oil temperatures are good. So cylinder head temperatures in the green, oil temperatures in the green, oil pressures in the green. All instruments look good, and fuel pressure is also good. Now throttle, we want to set it to about 10 to 1000 to 1200 RPM just to make sure that the engine doesn't shut down on us. So there we are at about 1100 RPM. I'll go ahead and keep it there. Next, control movements, check. Okay, so basically this rear view shows the different control surfaces. These are our elevators, this is our rudder, and these are our ailerons on the outer edges of the wings. So we've checked our controls, they're good. Back inside the cockpit, radio master switch to on. Instruments and radios set. Okay, so because I don't have air traffic control simulated in this simulator, you won't see me setting my comm frequencies, but you will see me setting my nav frequencies because they are what we will use to navigate out of this area. Our first nav aid is going to be the Mumbai VOR, and we're going to be navigating at the 1 degree radial from that VOR. That VOR is on a frequency of 116.6, which I've already got programmed over here. So that's beautiful. And I've already got my radial set in the Omni bearing selector, or the VOR gauge rather, using the Omni bearing selector over here. The next nav aid I actually will not need until we get to the Surat area, but I'm going to go ahead and get that programmed in anyway. It's always good to get as much work as you can done on the ground, because you want to reduce your workload in the cockpit so you can concentrate more on flying. That makes one a safer pilot. So let's see, we're going to be navigating, once we get to the Surat area, we're going to want to navigate from Surat NDB, which is located on a frequency of 201. So I'll go ahead and put 201 in my ADF now. Okay, we're on 201 now. I don't have reception yet, which is reasonable because we're still very far out. But anyway, our navigation instruments are now set. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and turn on our strobe lights, our nav lights, and our landing lights. I just did all that through the keyboard, so that's why you didn't see the well, the landing light I'll do through the mouse here. So, alright, back outside the aircraft, you can see that the engine is alive and our outside lighting is alive. Looks like the sun's starting to come up. It's a little bit more light out now. Annunciator lights, check. These are our warning lights. We just press the test button and make sure that they all work. Yes, that is good. Trim for takeoff. If we look down here, you can see that our trim is already set for takeoff. Good, that's done. Flaps to 15 degrees. So let's go ahead and lower those flaps to the takeoff marker. Okay, that's done. Okay, throttle 1900 to 2000. I'm actually not going to do that right now. I'm actually going to do that on the next step. Now, airspeed gauge, we have to sync to the outside temperature. Let me see what the outside temperature is. We actually have a gauge located here on the window. Let's see, outside temperature indicates to be about 26 degrees Celsius, I'll say. Okay, 26 degrees Celsius. Alright, let's go ahead and go back to our airspeed gauge. Sorry about that, too much zoom. Okay, airspeed indicator. Actually, that's set pretty close already. We're not too far from a standard day, so I'll go ahead and just leave that there. Next, alright, here's where we do the engine run-up. So basically I take the, I'm going to go back to the last page to see what the setting there was. Throttle to 1900 RPM. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ramp up our throttle to 1900 RPM, and then we'll do a magneto check. Here we go. Okay, there we are at 1900 RPM. I'm going to go ahead and move the ignition switch from both to left. Okay, we got about a 75 RPM drop there, so we're still good. I'm gonna go ahead and move it back and both to clear the plugs, and then I'm gonna go ahead and move it to right. Looks like another about 75 RPM drop, about 100 RPM drop, which is good because we're still under the 175 allotted, so that means our magnetos are working properly. Move that to both, move the throttle back to about 1100 RPM. Okay, doing good so far. Throttle back to idle. Excuse me. You'll probably hear me clear my throat a lot because I'm still getting over a really bad cold that I had. I just got my voice back 2 days ago. That's part of the reason why this video got delayed, because I didn't have a voice. Okay, pitot heat on. Let's go ahead and turn our pitot heat on. That would be here. Got that on. Next. Okay, next item on the checklist we will not need to, next few items on the checklist we will not need to do until we're actually done taxiing to the beginning of our takeoff runway. So I will go ahead and leave that checklist alone there and get my viewpoint in the cockpit set up properly. Okay, before we taxi, I'm gonna get the ATIS, which is basically a weather report from the airport, and that'll tell us what runway is in use, and that'll dictate where we taxi to. So let me go ahead and pull the ATIS from air traffic control. Alright, get ATIS from Mumbai Chhatrapati. Yep, that's the right airport. Alright, let's see what it says. Mumbai Chhatrapati Shivaji International Information Echo 100 Zulu weather, sky conditions 8500, scattered visibility 20, temperature 26, 2.0, wind calm, altimeter 2962. Okay, so we gotta set our altimeter to 2962. That'll give us our proper elevation, which is 39 feet. So there's our altimeter window, 2982. Or sorry, what was it again? 2962, sorry, 2962. No wonder I was getting the wrong reading there. 2962 is right about there, slightly less than 50 feet. So that looks good. Alright, and let's see, did it talk about what runway was in use? Let's bring it up again. Arriving and departing runway 09. Sorry about that. Looks like I got a text message. Let me check that real quick. Okay, I'm done reading my text message. Sorry about that. Where was I? Arriving and departing runway 09. Yes, okay, so we need to taxi to runway 09. Okay, so let me bring up my airport map. Airport navigator, view the map. Okay, got it. So we are over here right now, which is the red dot, I guess you can say. Shift control plus, I think, zoom in on the map a little bit. Can I zoom in on this map? It's okay, I think I'll just work with the zoom level. Airport 9, sorry, runway 9 is right here. Sorry about the background noise. The trash truck just showed up. Of course he has to show up when I'm making a video. Okay, so we're over here. The red dot basically shows where we are. We need to be right over here, which is the beginning of runway 9, and then we will have an eastbound departure, which is good because if you remember from my pre-flight planning, we want to avoid the restricted airspace, which is over the water. So if we were taking off in the opposite direction, we would have to make some sharp turns really quickly, north or south, towards the north or south, in order to avoid that restricted airspace. Anyway, let's plan how we're going to get to runway 9 from where we are, using the taxiways that this map is showing us. So I guess what I'll do is I'll taxi out of this ramp sort of like this, and then make a right turn and go along this taxiway, and we should be able to get to the beginning of runway 9 there. Okay, let's plan that. If I screw that up, we'll plan around that. Since this has not been rehearsed, it's completely live. I am unfamiliar with this airport. We'll try our best here. Okay, so get my viewpoint set back up, and I'll go ahead and bring the yoke back around, and let's go ahead and turn off our parking brake. Alright, parking brake is off, and I'll go ahead and turn to taxi power. Okay, it looks like we're starting to move. So the map shows us kind of moving in the right direction. You can see that here on the outside. So basically continue taxiing towards the edge of this ramp, and then we'll kind of skirt around the edge and look for the first turn onto that taxiway paralleling our takeoff runway. Now when you taxi, you don't want to taxi too fast because that could be dangerous when you try to make turns. This is a big airport, and for a aircraft at taxi speed, it'll take a while to get to the other side, which is pretty much what we have to do here. Very nice, beautiful early morning here in the Mumbai area. Looks like the sun is just starting to come up there. Okay, it looks like we're starting to come up on the first taxiway that we're going to use. Take a look from the outside. Oh, looks like the runway lights just went off. That's probably because now we have ample lighting from the sun. Okay, we're coming up on the intersection where we need to make a right turn. That's where we make a right turn. And this is basically the last taxiway that we're going to take. It's a long taxiway, so we'll be on it for a good while until we get all the way to the end of this taxiway, which will be runway 09. So that will put us on an eastbound departure away from the water. And shortly after that departure, we will have to make a left turn so that we can navigate according to our flight plan, which is northbound or towards the north. We'll fly over the Vasai Creek, and then we will start following the landmarks that we talked about in our flight planning session. The first of which is the rivers, the Vaitarna River. I'm going to go ahead and bump up the taxi speed just a little bit here so that it doesn't take us a year and a half just to get to the other side of the airport. I think I can safely go ahead and turn the map off now. Don't think we'll be needing that. These pop-up instruments that you see me popping in and out are basically double versions of instruments that are on the right-hand side of the cockpit. Basically they double as these gauges here. It's just kind of handy to pop them in the front because I don't have to keep turning my head to look at them all the way on the right side of the cockpit. I'll show you a view from the outside of us taxiing by. So you can see our flaps are down on the back side of the wings. Here we're crossing the runway here. We will assume that we have permissions rather to cross this runway. Normally before you cross a runway you will want to double and triple check with air traffic control that you've been cleared to do so. You can see that we're in the middle of the active runway now, or one of the active runways probably. Not a whole lot of other air traffic this morning. That's kind of because I have other airplanes disabled along with a lot of scenery features, otherwise my computer would just choke. I wouldn't even be able to make a good video. Let me bring that map up and see how we're doing. Okay, we're about slightly more than halfway through. Looks like we're going to cross another taxiway here. Just going to bump up the speed another notch. Very nice, very big airport. This is a lot more airport than we need with our small airplane, but this is the only airport in this area that we can take off from. It's been designed as an international airport with large jets in mind, so obviously we don't need these long runways, but we have all of them to use this morning. Almost there, guys, almost there. Just bear with me. Almost took us as long to taxi as it'll take us to fly. I think I'll take the far branch. That'll take us closer to the beginning of the runway. And we want to be able to use as much of the runway as we can. Looks like we're in some gravel here. It's taking more than usual engine power to move. Okay, finally we have taxied on to runway 9 and we will begin our takeoff here. I'm going to just go ahead and stop here. Turn our brake back on for a second. Get rid of our map since we don't need it anymore. Note our takeoff time is about 6:20 a.m. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our before takeoff checklist sorted out. Just going to get the yoke out of the way for a second. So the first thing we need to do is turn on our fuel pump. That's on. And now we're pretty much ready to start our takeoff roll. So here we go. Okay, power at full throttle, and we will rotate once the airspeed indicates 62 knots. And we rotate. Landing gear retraction. And I'll slowly start retracting the flaps. And I'll continue our initial climb out until we are at a safe altitude above the traffic pattern before I make that left turn towards our first leg of the flight plan. Okay, I can turn the fuel pump off now. And I'll set the engine to climb power. That's 26 inches on the MP gauge. 2600 RPM on the prop gauge. And I'll go ahead and make that left turn while I continue to climb towards our cruising altitude of 7,500 feet. There's the runway we just took off from. Go ahead and turn the landing light off. We don't need it anymore. And I think I will hold a heading of 330, which should be sufficient to intercept our first VOR radial. And I'm going to go ahead and get the autopilot to take control of the aircraft so I can concentrate more on navigation. Okay, we are above 3,000 feet now, so I can start on leaning my mixture. But first I'll show you a view from the outside. So here we are climbing to our, still working on climbing to our cruising altitude of 7,500 feet. And there in the background you can see Mumbai Airport, where we just took off from. That body of water cutting into the land right there in front of the airplane, not this first short one, but the long one, that's the Vasai Creek. So right now we're still climbing above, let's see, I'm looking on Google Maps and I think the area we're over right now is called Goregaon East. So we're somewhere between Andheri East and Goregaon East, climbing towards our cruising altitude of 7,500 feet. We're pretty much going to continue in that straight line as I discussed in the flight plan. We're going to go over Anita Nagar and then Borivali and Dahisar East and Mira Bhayandar before we get to the Vasai Creek. I'm sorry if my pronunciations are not correct. I am not from this area. I'm going to go ahead and lean the mixture for best economy. I'm sort of just guessing on the leaning right now because I still haven't reached my cruising altitude, so I won't be able to lean to my final setting yet. I'm just taking a look at my engine instruments, my fuel gauges, my temperature gauges, all seems good. I can get rid of the pop-up instruments for now. Looking over there to the east, we are looking up at Mulund West and Bhandup West areas. And sort of there to our right, maybe 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, is the area known as Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Okay, it looks like we're coming up on the Vasai Creek right now. That right there is the Banju Island, and this here should be Route 8, just off the right wing of the aircraft. And there you can see Mumbai Airport in the background getting smaller and smaller as we get further and further away. And it looks like we just arrived at our cruising altitude of 7,500 feet, so the autopilot is leveling us off. Beautiful view from up here. Out to the left side you can see the Arabian Sea. And to the right side you have the basically the mainland of the Indian subcontinent. Absolutely gorgeous. Excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna go through the cruise checklist here. Trim aircraft for level flight. Autopilot's taking care of that, so we don't have to worry about that right now. And I'm planning to cruise at 70% power, so that's let me go ahead and get that set up. That's 23.5 inches on my MP gauge and 2400 RPM on the prop gauge. That makes the airplane a lot quieter. Makes for a nicer ride. And I'll go ahead and lean the mixer some more. Okay, that's the engine stuttering, so that's our sweet spot. We're just going to enrich slightly. So this step is done, this step is done. And I'm going to go ahead and close the cowl flaps. The cowl flaps are basically flaps located under the engine compartment that control how much cooling you're giving your engine. In cruise we have a lot of airspeed, plenty of good airflow, so we don't need to keep our cowl flaps open. These two things here, 1 and 2, these are the cowl flaps. So watch what happens as I close them. There. The cowl flaps are now closed and we are pretty much at cruising altitude and cruising speed. Here's a flyby view. Beautiful, right? Okay, let's see where we are on the map. Actually, let me first go ahead and show you the map. Local map, center on aircraft. Okay, so basically this is Mumbai Airport. We took off from here, eastbound, made a left turn, then we intercepted our VOR radial, which is this red line. We flew over the Vasai Creek, and now we are headed towards the Vaitarna River, I believe. That's what it is. we're about 1,000 feet below the clouds, so they should not be a problem. So that road you see under the airplane right now is route number 8, and we are over the Nala Sopara East area right now. That right there is the Arnala Island. So we're about halfway done, or slightly more than halfway done, with the first leg of our flight. Which is the point at which the Vaitarna River and the Surya River are going to separate. And I don't know if you can see, but that's that point right there. Shooting off to the right, the Vaitarna River continues, and continuing to the north from this point is the Surya River, which is what we're planning to follow, if you remember according to the flight plan. Down there on the island, just below the left wing of the airplane, you can see a train on the train tracks. That's the Vadhiv Saravali area. Actually, if you look right on the water, two trains are about to cross each other from opposite directions. They just went under the tunnel bridge, so you can't see them anymore. Excuse me. Still recovering from that cold. I'm going to go ahead and bring the yoke back for some more realism. Just looking around to give you guys a good look around. This is a 4-seater airplane, the Mooney M20. Very nice airplane. Really practical little airplane for general aviation. Okay, we've got about 3 miles to go before we reach the point at which the rivers will split, and that will be our first leg of the flight plan. From there on, we will be continuing on our second leg of the flight plan towards Daman. Right now, we are approaching the Khadkoli area. Still got Route 8 running parallel to us there on the right. Which I believe in this area is known as the Lineomatic Road. Lineomatic Road. Those are the two mountain ranges that we're kind of going to fly between, that range there and that range there, as we discussed on the flight plan, if you remember. That city over there that you can see, that is Bhavnagar. I think that's how it's pronounced. And then slightly north of that, I think that area over there is the Boisar Saravali area. Okay, so we are now 35 miles out, according to my DME, from the Mumbai VOR. And we have 47 miles to go before we reach the Daman area. So we are directly abeam the Bhavnagar area, which is down below our left wing. And we're getting pretty close to the clouds here. Got some lower clouds. Show you a flyby view. So just to give you a look at my instruments, this is the airspeed indicator. It's showing an indicated airspeed of about 140 knots. True airspeed is about 140 knots as well. This is the altimeter indicating that we are currently at 7,580 feet. This is the clock giving the time of day in the simulation, not the time of day where I actually am right now, but just the time of day in the simulator, flight simulator. This is our heading indicator showing that we're going due north. And if we take a look back outside to see where we are, we're pretty much reaching the area where the Surya River turns right, and we will no longer be flying with it. This would be the Naini Valley or the Thabon area. And those mountains that you see right there, just before we reach them, we will be flying over the Ambesari area and the Nagzari area. These are just cities that I'm naming as I'm looking at Google Maps, so again, I'm very sorry if I don't pronounce something correctly. That body of water you see jutting into the land over there, that is the Dahanu area. And also the city of Bada Pokharan is there. Okay, we are now 48 miles away from the Mumbai VOR. We are directly abeam the Dahanu area. That puts us somewhere over the I think right now we're crossing over the Dahanu Jevhar Road. And Manipur will come on to our left shortly, followed by Ambesari. So we just reached Ambesari. And that right there is the Kurs Reservoir. That small body of water that you see there. And way over there on the horizon is the Madhuban Reservoir. Just absolutely beautiful all around. You can see the beauty of the landscape. You would be able to see a lot more roads and vehicles on the roads and a lot more buildings on the ground if I had my scenery settings turned up, but like I said, my computer is not very powerful, and if I do that, then I would not be able to have respectable frame rates. There's no way I could make a flight video. So you can still see the major features like mountains, rivers, lakes, and major roads, but you can't see every little minor road. That's why I'm looking along Google Earth as we fly, or Google Maps rather, just to give you an idea of the different areas as the airplane flies over them. So if you look on my local map, going back to the airplane, I'll zoom out a little bit. That's the Daman area. That's where we're trying to go, and we're almost done flying between the mountain ranges. The last of the mountain ranges pretty much ends at this point here. Let's go back to the airplane. We've got about 20 nautical miles to go before we reach Daman. I believe that area right there where you see that water jutting back into the land, that sound, that is the Fansa Lake, and the peninsula to the north of that is the Jampur Beach area. And way over there where you see that river coming in, that's the Daman area. I think right there is one of the runways of the Daman Coast Guard station. Although I may be wrong, but that looks like that might be the beginning of the runway lights there. We'll find out as we get closer. This last mountain is the Punat area, and then just between the two rivers is the Mohan area. You can see a train going down there below on the train tracks. And that is still the Linumatic road going with us, which is Route 8. Just where the Linumatic road intersects the river, that is the Nahuli and Iklahare area. And it looks like we can see the runways of the Daman Coast Guard station right there. That's where the second leg of our flight plan will end, and we will make a slight left turn onto the third leg of our flight, which will take us towards the Surat airport. Clouds just look very beautiful all the way from up here. Almost like we're touching them. Okay, we are almost at Daman. Let me take a look down there to see. Yep, you can see the runways there, right there. And pretty much when we're right over that, we're going to make that left turn. almost there. This area that you can see right here, that beach going along the coast, that's the Devka Beach area, which I'm sure is a beautiful area in real life. With my scenery settings turned so low, you can't really see the beauty of it. Very beautiful. Alright, we're pretty much over the Daman Coast Guard Station. We'll make that left turn towards Surat now. This gauge here is pointing towards the Surat NDB, so that will guide us towards the Surat airport. Recall that when I started this flight, this gauge was not picking up reception, but now we're getting quite close to the area where we need to be. So it is receiving the signal, and if you look from the outside, this is that leg of the flight that I was talking about that finally takes us over the water. So we'll be over the water for a short while here until we get to the Surat area. That's when we'll be back on land. And then we'll be on land again for a little bit before we decide to actually cross the bay towards Bhavnagar, which is our final destination. You can see the shadow or the reflection of the clouds in the water down there. Very beautiful. So we are now headed out over the Arabian Sea. So just to our right should be the Udvada, Pardi and Andarwad area. Not much to see there, especially with my low scenery settings, but I can show you from the outside. Next plane, it just looks like a desert. All this landscape here is actually a little bit inaccurate because this is showing kind of like an Outer Banks area followed by more water and then the Indian mainland. In real life, there is no Outer Banks area over here. It's just the water and the land. So this is sort of inaccuracy on the part of X-plane scenery. My closest approximation for where we are right now, I would have to say that this area right here would be the town of Udvada. And then that road right there would be going towards the area known as Kila Pardi. It looks like my left fuel tank is getting pretty close to empty, so the right fuel tank has a little more fuel in it, so I'm going to go ahead and make a switch to the right fuel tank. That switch is down here on the floor. Oh, I'm already on the right fuel tank. Okay, that's good. And I'll just have to watch that one, and when it gets low, I'll switch back to the left. And all engine temperatures are in the green ranges. Oil temperature, oil pressure, that's good. So our plane is doing good. I'm going to take a look at my flight plan sheet that I have sitting here next to me to see what we need to do once we get to the Surat area. So at Surat we basically make another left turn, but it's a very, very slight left turn. And we only go 20 nautical miles before we actually decide to cross the bay. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. This needle here will start going pretty crazy and unstable once we get close to Surat, and that is a characteristic of ADF needles. They do that as you get close to the receiving station. Okay, it looks like we are on our farthest point from the land. We will not go any further over the water on this leg of the flight, which puts us right next to the Valsad area. So that area right there is Valsad, the city of Valsad, the town of Valsad. With our current flight path, we will reach land over the Purna Creek, which it seems is right there, coming right up. This body of water going to the right is the Purna Creek, which means that chunk of land right there is the town of Ubrat. Usually I try not to look outside the airplane too much because I consider that cheating. Real pilots don't have that luxury. They have to look from the cockpit and try to tell where they're going. But this is supposed to be a scenic flight mainly for people who are going to watch this video, and I want you guys to enjoy. I don't want you to be staring at this instrument panel here. That's why I keep switching to outside views. At Surat, we will also begin a descent to 6,500 feet as our cruising altitude, as our new cruising altitude. Technically, I should have started that descent at the last checkpoint, but I forgot to do that. Actually, I can just go ahead and even do it now. I'll go ahead and enter that as our new cruising altitude, and I will instruct the autopilot to make a gentle descent. And we will be at that new altitude in about 2 minutes. So we're descending slightly over the Purna Creek, and at the same time we're getting close to Surat Airport now. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that runway. I'm going to go ahead and turn on our landing light while we're descending, just to make ourselves more visible to other aircraft for better safety. So we are back over land now. Just to give you an idea of our flight path. That's our flight path right behind us. That's the path that the airplane has been flying. So you can see that it's kind of wedging downwards because we're in a descent. I'll show you in a flyby view. Go ahead and turn that off because that's kind of annoying. And as you can see, my scenery for Surat Airport is not exactly very pretty, because that is the runway for Surat Airport and it shows to be in the water, which we all know is not what it looks like in real world. So I'm very sorry for the bad scenery or lack of scenery accuracy here, but this is basically the Surat Airport area. See it a little bit better now. That is Surat Airport right there. So we've descended 1,000 feet to an altitude of 6,500 feet now. I'll go ahead and turn the landing light back off, and we are now directly over the Surat airport, which basically just looks like a runway sitting in the water. So I'll go ahead and turn to our new heading of 349 magnetic. Okay, so I just made that turn and we are now headed to the Narmada estuary area. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the Bhavnagar VOR programmed into my Nav1 receiver so that once we get to the Narmada estuary area we can navigate to that. That's on a frequency of 114.1, so I'll go ahead and dial that in. Zoom in on that dial a little bit to get my course programmed correctly. I need the 305-degree radial. That's it right there. So we have left Surat Airport behind us now. And we are flying over the Bhadpur and Ichhapur area. The peninsula, which is just to the left of the aircraft there, that's the Hazira area. Take a look at my fuel tanks to see which one has more fuel. Okay, right now we're taking fuel from the right tank, and left tank looks, it has even less than the right tank, so I'll go ahead and keep it on the right tank. So we still have about 0.8 hours of fuel left, which means we have plenty to complete the flight. Okay, it looks like our VOR needle is starting to center, which means we're nearing the Narmada estuary, and that's when we will also make a turn directly towards the Bhavnagar area. Looking from the outside, just to show you where we are. This is the area of the Narmada estuary, and now we're going to make another turn left and shoot straight across the water and cross the Gulf of Kambat. So there goes our left turn. So we are now 33 nautical miles away from Bhavnagar, and according to the flight planning calculations I did, I'm going to need about 23 nautical miles to descend to the lower altitude so that I can make a landing. So in about 10 miles I'll start my final descent, and I'll go ahead and bring up my checklist. Just keep it ready for my descent. Let's see if I can pick up an ATIS to see what the weather at Bhavnagar is like. Okay, Bhavnagar information, sky conditions 8500, scattered visibility 20, temperature 26, altimeter 2962, arriving and departing runway 7. Okay, so runway 7 is where we need to plan to land. So we're crossing over the Gulf of Kambat and making our way towards Bhavnagar. That island you see in the water right there, slightly to our left, about 11 o'clock, that is the Piram Bait. I don't know if that's the name of the island or if that's the name of the city, but that's just what it says on Google Earth. Sorry, Google Maps. Okay, we are now only 25 miles out, so I will go ahead and start our descent. We will descend at about 700 feet per minute to our pattern altitude, which will be about 1,050 feet. Or about 1,100 feet. Go ahead and turn on our landing light again. I'm going to go ahead and decrease our power to keep the airspeed in check. and I'll start going through the descent checklist. So the first thing we'll do is advance our prop and enrich our mixture. Okay, cowl flaps closed. ATIS, we already have the weather. Radios, we already have our nav radio set. Fuel quantity. Let's take a look at that fuel one more time. We still seem to have more fuel in the right tank, so I'll go ahead and keep it over there. Airspeed less than 135. We're currently at about 130. And landing gear, we won't extend until we get a little closer. Prop is already at high RPM. Airspeed on final 71, flaps full down. Okay, great. Alright, so we're getting pretty close now. If I show you on our X-plane map, this is the island of Pirambet, and that's Bhavnagar Airport right there. We'll make a series of turns once we get closer to the airport to line up with the intended landing runway, which is runway 7, as you heard on the ATIS report. And right about here where we're gonna make landfall, that's where you'll find the city of Goga. So we're gonna fly over Goga and then we'll prepare for our landing. That's the Goga area right there. Go ahead and shallow our descent a little bit. So we are almost on land again, almost done crossing the Gulf. We're past the Pirambet Island now. And I think Bhavnagar Airport is going to be somewhere in this area, although I can't quite make it out yet. We're still 9 miles away. Yeah, I can start to see it right there. That's the runway for Bhavnagar Airport right there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start slowing down for a landing. We are now 4 miles away. I'll start making the pattern turns once we get into about within 3 nautical miles. I'll go ahead and put in the first notch of flaps in. And I will go ahead and turn the autopilot off and take over the airplane so I can perform the landing myself. That's the autopilot beep. Okay, I'll make the pattern turn. We are now flying parallel to the runway, but we have to land from the opposite direction. That's why I need to make all these turns. And at this point I'll go ahead and turn on our fuel pump. See a road going down here with cars on it. Okay, I'll turn to base and extend full flaps and extend my landing gear. So we are on a right base leg for runway 7 at Bhavnagar Airport. There's the runway off to our right. And that directly ahead of us is the town of Bhavnagar. Okay, I'll make the turn to final now. You can see cars on the road. Okay, that is our landing at Bhavnagar Airport in Bhavnagar, India. Finally we made it all the way from Mumbai. I'll go ahead and continue taxiing to the end where I can get off the runway. Go ahead and pull in the flaps. Weather is not too bad over here as well. Okay, I don't really have custom scenery for this airport, so I really don't have a place to park. So I'll just make like we're already on the parking ramp and just park somewhere over here and shut down the aircraft. That should be good enough. So parking brake is on. If you want to see a replay of this landing, I can go ahead and show that to you. So here's landing in replay mode. I'll go ahead and speed it up a little bit. Okay, I'll go ahead and slow it back down for the final turn. This is replay mode, so I'm not controlling the airplane here. It's just a replay of what you just saw. The cars on the road do not move in replay mode, so it looks strange. I would say that's an acceptable landing. Okay, we'll go back out of replay mode and shut down our airplane. So here we are, parked at not Mumbai Airport. We are at Bhavnagar Airport. We flew from Mumbai Airport. And this airplane is actually not too complicated to shut down. Basically, we shut off all our lights and instruments. And we pull the mixture to kill the engine. Turn the master switch off. Turn the ignition switch off. We're pretty much done with the checklist. All that remains to be done now is to open the passenger door, as well as to open the cargo door. And here we are. You can get out of the airplane right now, and you are in Bhavnagar. Make sure to visit the Sri Vallabh Haveli. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next flight. Goodbye now.